So how can we create some more tolerance within the nervous system to be able to sit with these really uncomfortable physical sensations, emotions that you just desperately want to avoid, memories maybe that you want to escape from. So all of those things that I think for a lot of people, again, it's really easy to want to lean toward like a quick fix. And
welcome back to another episode of Sessions for the Soul.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen. There's like a million podcasts out there to listen to, and you're
here
choosing to spend time with us. So we love that.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So this episode is we're going to dive into all things nervous system and regulation.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to talk to you about this and just hear your hear you like share your expertise and like shine. This is going to be so fun.
Yeah. So last episode we talked about healing, like what is healing? What is a healing journey? What is that concept? And I feel like the concept of nervous system healing, nervous system regulation is also like such a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
And again, it can come with like a lot of confusion, a lot of maybe like misconceptions, and like what is it really?
Mm-hmm.
And from like a really functional standpoint, I guess we can just kind of like lay the framework of like what is the nervous system, like what is its function, what is it in the body, why do we have it, all of that stuff, like just the basics. The nervous system is literally our response of kind of moving into that fight or flight response. So like the more it's called the sympathetic nervous system, so getting ramped up, ready for action, survival, protection, all of those things. And then on the flip side of that is the parasympathetic of like, how do we downregulate? How do we get into that like rest or digest is sometimes what it's called, but that state of feeling at ease. And so we have like this back and forth between these two nervous system states, and it can feel confusing, I think, sometimes. And it can, I think, also be kind of misconstrued as like, in order to be in fight or flight, it has to be like this big, crazy response.
Yeah.
And that's not always it either.
Yes.
So there's a lot, I think, a lot to unpack in terms of how we kind of move throughout these responses, why they're there, and what we can really do about it.
Absolutely.
To start regulating.
I'm so excited. You already sort of started talking about like trauma responses and like the fight or flight. Can you like speak a little bit more on what fight or flight is? I think we hear that so much like out in the world or online or whatever. Yeah. But a lot of people, like you said, like it can be so much more subtle. And I think that's such an important thing to touch on.
Yeah.
So can you like tell us a little bit more about fight or flight and how it can maybe show up in a more like regular, subtle way than maybe we realize?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think from like, if we start from something that feels more dramatic and obvious, it would be something like a trauma response is something that's really common for people, where if you are experiencing some sort of a trauma, whether it be physical, sexual, emotional, or a lack of safety, so that could also be like neglect in some way of, basic needs like food and water and shelter and things like that, the body has a way of protecting itself. And so the fight or flight mode that we go into, and we'll go into fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, are also part of this mechanism, the survival mechanism. Yeah. But that's what it's there to do, is to protect you. And so if you, for example, in this modern world, maybe a big trauma would be if you're getting robbed, right? Like if you're getting jumped on the street,
right?
Like that is a big situation. Number one, that can be a trauma situation. And number two, it's activating your nervous system to figure out, what do I need to do to survive?
Absolutely.
How do I survive someone who's attacking me physically, who's threatening to take, at this point, really valuable information that could be used in ways that we don't want it to be used. And so the body will physiologically move into a state of protection and survival and activation. And so you can think of things like tunnel vision, right? Like our vision literally starts to kind of zero in on the thing that we're trying to protect ourselves from. Our heart rate starts to increase, our breathing starts to change. We're not having like those really relaxing, slow, deep breaths. We're having really quick, shallow
Yeah.
breaths. Physically, you might start feeling like kind of shaky,
Mm-hmm.
buzzy energy, heat, all of those things, right? So
Yes.
there's some of those like foundational things. And then maybe people who are listening can also think about like their own personal experiences of, where that shows up in your body. But basically, you're going into an activation mode to protect yourself.
Yes.
And so those are like obviously getting robbed is not something that you're going to experience every day. So that's a big, big example of the fight or flight response. But we can experience that in smaller ways too.
Absolutely.
And it could be something like if we were to have a little conflict right now where it's like, ooh, this isn't feeling good, and
Right.
there's a rift here. There's some activation that happens where it's like, okay, so how do I position myself to protect
Yes.
myself? It could be things like, I mean, this is maybe the hyperactivity of the nervous system, but like getting an email where you're like, oh God, what is this going to be? It's from my boss. I need to see what it says. And it could be all these things, right? So the hyperactivity of the nervous system where it can be a little overreactive to things that don't necessarily require a big response.
Right. Like I love seeing online sometimes, people are like on the socials, on the social medias when they're like,
Mm-hmm.
it's wild that my brain can't like tell the difference between like being held at gunpoint and
Yep.
receiving an email. And like that's very real, I think. Just
Yeah.
in the modern world, right? Like our animal brain is still super active.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious too, like from what I understand about it and, just like my own personal experience is
Yeah.
people can kind of get stuck in fight or flight as their baseline. And,
Yes.
whether that's from like chronic stress or maybe their relationships or their work or just their like everyday reality. And can you talk a little bit about how like that might show up and what that might look like? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think maybe some of our listeners might
Mm-hmm.
um, benefit from learning this information.
Yeah, yeah, it really is like that hyperactivity, that response that's like it's almost like a an oversensitized response, right? And so if you're constantly in a state of like chronic stress where you are living in quote unquote survival mode every day,
Mm-hmm.
where you're just like running on fumes and you're just trying to get by and you're highly anxious all the time and maybe feel like you have nothing left to give, but you have to show up for your life. That can feel super exhausting. And
Mm-hmm.
what's happening is your body's endocrine system or the hormonal system is just like, it's just over activated. A therapist I worked with in the past years ago said they described it as like a hose that's like running water and it just keeps spewing and spewing and spewing. The hose being your adrenals, which sit on top of your
Yes.
kidneys. And so the adrenal glands, which are producing the cortisol and the adrenaline in your body, and it's just flooding your veins and your brain with this
Mm.
adrenaline. And so when you're in this like overactivated state where the hose is just like not turning off and it's just on this like constant, I want to say drip, but it's not a drip, it's like
It's like a
full,
flood.
yes, a flood of these hormones. Your whole system just like gets
Mm.
uh put off kilter, and it's trying to figure out a way to reset, but it's also so exhausted and so depleted and so overused, and so it can be really easy to move into that space of being in survival mode as your baseline level of
Yes.
operating. And it
Yeah.
takes time. I mean, this kind of looking back at our previous episode of like, it takes time and some intentionality, but also just these like slow, subtle changes over time. Like, you're not going to fix that overnight.
No.
It took a long time for your body to get there. And it's going to take a while to get yourself out of that as well.
Been there, babe. Been there.
Yeah.
No, for sure. That's why I was really curious just to have you explain that like on a level that we can all understand because I really have experience that. And I know so many people who experience that every day.
Yeah.
And it is, I remember when I first start to do nervous system, I was
Mm-hmm.
doing EMDR. I was 22. Um, and I would go to my therapist's office and she could just like see me like tightened up like
Yes.
wrung out like a
Yes.
towel, sort of like so much tension and
Mm-hmm.
like so tight. And she would make me do these exercises to like bring me into my body to start the session.
Yeah.
And there were so many times where I was like, I want to take it. I can't, like, I need a nap now.
Yeah.
Or I would just be so exhausted
Yeah.
moving through the session because she brought me out of fight or flight for the first time in, you know, since the last time I was in her office, which was
Mm-hmm.
like usually a week apart. And just the exhaustion that would flood my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to really help our listeners understand how maybe it's like a subtle thing that they aren't aware is happening for them,
Yeah.
and how to tune into that, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and that's such a good point because it really can be so subtle. So we talked a little bit about like the chronic stress standpoint of having these like constant, ongoing chronic exposures to stress, and so that kind of changes your baseline operating level within your nervous system where you're in kind of like a constant state of activation. But
Mm-hmm.
then we can look at something like a really big trauma as well and say, okay, so I'm not having these repeated traumas or stressors, but I had this really big unfortunate experience.
Yeah.
And my body in that moment, I think of people that I've worked with who have such a big, if we think of like, unfortunately, sexual abuse is a big common example here of a big trauma that has happened. And in that moment, in order to survive the dissociation that happens there. And so you learn in that moment, this is how I stay safe.
Mm.
And by doing so, I'm removing myself from the situation. This isn't happening to me. It's happening to, somebody else or another version of me, etc. And so those patterns, when you have such a big trauma, can become really like deeply ingrained in the
Mm.
way that you operate. And so after something like this example, you might find yourself dissociating a lot, disconnecting from yourself, having kind of these like out of body experiences, things of that nature. And that's the nervous system remembering this thing happened that's too painful for me
Mm-hmm.
to face.
Yeah.
And so how do I deal with that? I remove myself.
Yeah.
And so it can be from like the overactivation of the nervous system can be from those big traumas, or it could be from like these series of chronic stressors. And yeah, like you said, to your point of like it's not always obvious. Like sometimes we need someone like your therapist. And I had a very similar experience too of literally sitting in my therapist's office, and she pointed out literally the way that I was sitting, and I've been very conscious about this ever since that, of like having a more open posture, even if you're watching, like sitting facing each other, being open shoulders, having my arm up on the back of the chair, like those kinds of things that communicate like, okay, I'm open, I'm
Mm-hmm.
relaxed, I'm open to receiving, and to giving, instead of the version of myself that I was at the time of being like collapsed,
Mm.
a completely collapsed posture. And people are able to pick up on those cues, and we don't always notice it. Like we don't notice in ourselves like, oh, I have a lot of tension in my muscle system or my fascia, my facial expressions are different and people are kind of picking up on it, but I don't know that I'm like a little tense in my brow or my jaw is
Yeah.
clenched. So those things, those are like the physical expression or manifestation of it that we don't always see. And sometimes it can be really helpful for someone to step in and be like, hey, you're looking a little tense. What
Yes.
if we try to soften for a minute, or, take a few really
Mm.
deep breaths because you're breathing really shallow into your chest. And so let's send some breath down into the belly or the pelvic floor and to really expand and give
Yeah.
your body some space to just exhale.
Yes, absolutely. And give your, everything a chance to kind of
Mm-hmm.
like catch up. I feel like you said, it is that like slow, gradual over time change because that that flood of everything turning off, it kind of like feels like a crash at first. But the more that we regulate and the more that we do that, like
Yeah.
the more change happens and the more that our body starts to come back to
Yeah.
where it's been, for sure. Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I have a hunch, and I could be totally wrong here, but I feel like a lot of people are probably a little bit more ramped up than they realize in their
Mm-hmm.
day-to-day lives
Yes.
because of just sort of like the rat race, the go go go.
Yeah.
We're not like, it's not really common, I feel like. And my favorite thing is, just because it's common doesn't mean that it's normal.
Yeah.
So it's not really common to like take a moment to pause and like check in with our bodies and to check in with our nervous system,
Mm-hmm.
um, in the world we live in our day-to-day lives. And unfortunately that isn't normal, and we should actually take more time to tune in, check in,
Yeah.
to see what our body is needing and not ignore those cues. But maybe our jobs or our lives or just maybe what we're used to hasn't really promoted that or allowed that.
Yeah.
And maybe, we can talk about this eventually, is some ways to do that, because I think that's important.
Very valuable. Yeah, we will
Definitely.
definitely stick with us, and we will
Stay tuned.
yes, we will definitely get into some very helpful and specific ways that you can kind of take that pause and allow your mind and your body to just like have a moment of stillness and
Yeah.
exhale. As you were saying that, I was thinking about how it's almost glamorized
Oh
to be in
gosh.
the state of survival mode. It's really interesting. But also, is it interesting and surprising? It's
Right.
it's pretty expected, I guess. But like the concept of like hustle culture, which we've talked a little bit about in previous episodes, it's like you're praised
Hmm.
for running on fumes, for doing so much, for overloading your plate that is your to-do list. Like
Absolutely.
it's definitely like you
Mm.
wear it as a badge of honor
Yes.
and it becomes your identity.
Absolutely. You are really shining a light on something right now that I'm thinking about. And it's like, it's outsourcing our worthiness into what we do and not who we are and what we
Yeah,
are. And it
yes.
like that, this ties into codependency in a huge way. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we'll get into that eventually. But, um, you know, it is glamorized to like, how productive are you? How exhausted are you at the
Yep.
end of every day? How much do you do?
Yeah.
Not like, we don't do a great job as a culture and just as a world about really being like allowing or looking at rest or um caring for our nervous system and our bodies is like a standard. It's like earned through,
It's like an
right?
extra little thing on the side. Like,
Right. And in like, well, did you earn it?
mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you're going on vacation. Oh, you're being lazy on a Saturday. I
Mm-hmm.
literally hate that so much.
Yeah.
I think it's really something we all kind of struggle with, of like feeling the guilt of like just stillness.
Mm-hmm.
But I also see it a lot in men,
Mm-hmm.
really feeling like, "Oh, I'm just being lazy. I hate it." No, you're not being lazy. You're exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
You worked all week.
Mm-hmm.
You've been, going over,
Yeah.
and you actually just need to sit down for a moment and allow your body a moment to rest.
Yeah.
And I think of like, there's so many names that come to mind, and when you were talking about kind of like how our culture praises this, of celebrities even, or like influencers who kind of promote this like
Yeah.
do everything kind of lifestyle, or like, I'm so busy, all I do is work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we could think of a few who it's like, that's great. Cool.
Yeah. But how do you actually feel in your mind and body?
Yeah. And how's like, how's your, if you didn't, have maybe the access
Mm-hmm.
to the things that you do because of financials or whatever, like, are
Yeah.
you actually healthy? And how are like your kids doing?
Mm-hmm.
How's your like overall like
Yeah.
health, and I think it's so common and I mean, we've talked about this. We're going to talk about this, I'm sure, a lot. But in the last episode, we talked about how social media can kind of contribute to like that
Yeah.
comparison or that like pressure of like, I need to do this.
Yeah.
Or if I want that life, or if I want that like financial freedom or to look like that, I need to be doing X, Y, and Z. And this person does it this way, so I must have to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, that we could continue down that path. But it's really interesting because we don't really live in a culture that like promotes nervous system regulation.
Mm-hmm.
Even our phones are so dysregulating. And
It's an amazing tool to completely abandon your life. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I love that I did not know what you were going to say, and I love that that's what came out. You're like, it's an amazing tool to like ruin everything. I love that.
Well, fill in the blank with like drugs, sex,
yes,
like all of it, right? So, and it's just another tool where, of course, like, yes, you can use it responsibly. Amazing for those of you who do. Most people are using it as a tool to completely leave their life.
Babe,
like,
I have not figured out how to use it responsibly. Yeah. Okay. First of all, let's start there.
Yeah,
no,
it's tough.
It's tough. It is so hard. And that's why, like, when I see young children with a cell phone, I'm like, oh, they're fucked. I'm really sorry.
It's rough.
If this is triggering for anyone listening, if you have a 12-year-old with a cell phone, I'm really sorry if that was hard to hear, but think about how damaging it is for you to have your phone all the time, and think about a kid brain whose prefrontal cortex is not developed. Like, no, like, no. I am so glad my parents did not let me have cell phones until I was, 13, and social media even later, because I would not be well.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't go well. It's really easy to become very, very dysregulated, and to also like, I think because it's often used as a tool for like, well, yeah, to kind of like cure or to take care of whatever the discomfort is that you're in. So if you're feeling bored, and instead of sitting in the boredom, which boredom in and of itself might feel really uncomfortable, like, oh my God, I'm sitting here and I have nothing to do. My worth isn't everything that I do. And so that feels really uncomfortable. So I'm going to pull out my phone and distract myself from the nothingness that this moment has, right? Or it could be, I'm feeling really, really anxious about this thing, this conversation I just had, this project I'm working on, the new job I'm starting, whatever. And so instead of sitting with the anxiety or applying, effective coping skills, you're like, let me scroll on my phone for 2 hours. And that's not to say like, okay, so if you pull out your phone and you're like, using it for 10, 15 minutes to like check out for a minute and give yourself a little break, fine. But most people aren't doing that. It's a way to completely disconnect and avoid the emotional experience that you're having, or the somatic, the like physical experience that you're having that's really uncomfortable or uneasy. And it's a great way to just like check out.
Absolutely. And it's filled with dopamine hits. Like, I think that's such an important thing to point out for people if they don't know about this, and just to remind the people that do know. Every like social media, I listened to this podcast recently, and it was like the big tech, like the biggest CEOs in the tech industry, and people who work for Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Meta, all having a discussion about how their kids 100% and themselves do not have the apps, are not involved in the apps, and they will not allow their children to have the apps. And when they were asked why, they shared because it is 100% designed to addict you. It acts the same way in the brain that drugs do. And just noting that, and I know that this is like, there's irony. The irony is not lost on us that we're coming to you
through one of the platforms.
Yeah, through one of these platforms. Because it's like, how do you, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we've talked about this, the conflict or like the not knowing how to get out of this. Because it's like, this is what we've been given. This is the tool we've been given to like access people, to access information.
Yeah.
But I found that so frustrating when I heard them all say that, because they were like, oh, I would never let my kids do this. It would ruin their brains. It addicts them. It does all this. And I literally was like red hot, because I'm like, you guys are making millions of dollars off of all of us. And
Yeah.
like uh, young children, you know, like, oh, ugh. It's just another way to like, you know, really.
It's a beautiful business design,
Oh
right?
my God. Well,
Like,
and
you know what I mean? Like it just I'm reading a book from Gabor Mate, I
I
think is
mean,
how it's
yeah,
pronounced.
I think.
The Myth of Normal, and it talks about some of these companies. I don't know if it talks about social media in particular, but it talks about these companies that it's like these big tech companies that literally hire these, you know, behavioral health professionals, mental health, psychiatric professionals, all of these things that study the mind and what it is that, you know, gets us so hooked on something,
Mm,
to be able to literally like disconnect from the experience. And so it's perfectly designed, and it can be really challenging to to be in this place, but to also recognize like this is the reality. How do we work within the framework that we're currently in, or the context that we're currently living in? So yeah, it's tough. It can be super dysregulating
yeah,
for a lot of people.
absolutely.
And I think that word dysregulating, sometimes there can be like the misconception that, you know, if we're talking about phone use right now, but like the concept of, but I feel calm when I'm using my phone. I feel like at peace, at ease.
That's called sedation.
Yeah, yes. Yeah. It's a Xanax is what
Oh,
that is. So like,
literally.
yeah.
I
So
mean, yeah, like when you were talking about that, I'm thinking about like, and just as we were both, you know, kind of unpacking those things, I'm thinking about
mhm.
the moments where I am anxious, or
Yep.
um maybe I'm like really uncomfortable and I like go scroll on my phone in bed, or
Yeah.
it's late at night and I'm like trying to
Hmm.
like sedate myself to sleep, because I've removed all my vices
Yeah.
that previously were, you know,
Yeah.
binkies. Let's just be real.
Yeah.
They're adult binkies.
Yeah. Yep.
And
Pacifier, like literally that
yeah,
word pacify, to pacify. Yeah.
it is to pacify.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. That's
Yeah.
actually so insane. And I really am personally have been like, you know, you and I have talked about this on this journey recently, where like I am so, I desire deeply a bit more regulated state with social media on my phone. And it's hard with our jobs, with the career
Yeah.
we've chosen. Um, and then, you know, my other job is literally running social media accounts for people's businesses.
Yeah.
And you can, on any given Tuesday, you can find me like just really burnt out from it, and
Yeah.
really desiring to be off of it, because there's something like there's, and we did talk about this in the last episode, so if you haven't listened to it or if you missed it, I definitely would go give it a listen, because we do talk about just the comparison and all of the messaging, and it can be really overwhelming, and that in itself is dysregulating, and that in
Totally.
itself is like, because it's like, you're not doing enough, you're not doing this right, you're doing that wrong, you should be, you should. And
Yeah.
when you know, when we should all over ourselves,
Hmm.
like that's heavy, and that is like, that in itself can kind of encourage that disassociation of like, it's so loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, if we look at like the fight, flight, freeze, fawn breakdown of responses, just for people who might be thinking like, oh, I don't know what that really means. Like fight
Mm-hmm.
or flight, sure, I can kind of understand, like, you know, getting in this activated state. But it gets fairly nuanced when you start looking at like fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, like these four categories that have been developed of where people kind of tend to go when they're in a stressful situation, a traumatic experience, a situation of survival,
Yeah.
or having the overactivated system, and you're just getting an email that's like spinning you out. So, but if we look at something like fight, it's kind of the common example, or the common picture of this person who's kind of aggressive, who's maybe highly defensive if you're trying to like confront them about something, or lovingly bring something up and it's met with like a lot of aggression and defensive behavior. Physically, maybe you're someone who's like tense, like clenching your jaw and clenching your fists or things like that, where it's filled with aggression, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's that fight state of I'm going to literally fight this person physically or verbally or whatever it may be, to preserve, meant for self-preservation. Um, Flight would be fleeing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I think it was in the last episode you mentioned like falling into some of those or having some of those patterns, wanting to kind of like rear up again, like, oh, I want to leave this thing, I'm gonna like burn this to the ground. And
Yes.
it's that flight response of how can I um run away from or abandon whatever the issue is at stake, no matter how big or small. How can I run from or get away from the
Yeah,
potential threat, right? And that can
absolutely.
be a physical threat. It can be the threat of, okay, I'm in a relationship and there's, of course, a threat of heartbreak. It could be, a new job and there's a threat of all sorts of things, right? So
Right.
having the tendency to want to leave
Mm-hmm.
and detach yourself from it. Freeze is, I think of like a possum, you know what I mean? Where they like have no defenses left and they play dead.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what that is for us as well as
Mm-hmm.
humans. Obviously, it's a little different because we have other defenses that we can use, but we fall into that pattern of like, I've tried everything and this is all I have left. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to freeze. I'm going to detach. This is kind of like the dissociating that we talked about earlier, removing yourself, emotionally from the situation. It can be literally freezing physically. So if you're in, I don't know, maybe like a car accident situation and you have the whole scene around you and you're just like frozen,
Mm-hmm.
like you're not able to act, you're not able to do anything in that moment. And that's okay. Like this is your body, like kind of in
Yeah.
shock of like, what do I do here?
Yeah.
How do I survive this? So that's freeze. And then fawn, I think we'll talk a lot about in the next episode too. But of like the people pleasing, how do
Mm-hmm.
I caretake for the perpetrator if there's a perpetrator involved? How do I kind of take care of everyone else's needs to keep the peace?
Absolutely. Yes. I'm excited for us to kind of dive into that. But
Yeah.
I think so many people don't realize that, like, the fawn response, like, I think we kind of, there's misconceptions that come with each of these.
Yeah.
And when it comes to people pleasing or caretaking or any of that, I don't think we really realize, or on a surface level, maybe if you have some of those patterns, you're not realizing that that's actually a literal response
Mm-hmm.
to
Yes.
external circumstances,
Yeah.
or a mechanism for your brain to keep you safe.
Yeah.
I think, you know, maybe we associate that with like, oh, wanting to avoid confrontation, or maybe wanting to like uh do good, or
Mm-hmm.
the word left me, I had it, but there's things we associate that with that like maybe we don't realize are actually like trauma responses.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is a trauma response.
Mm-hmm.
And w- there are, I think something we can touch on too right here is like big T's and little T's. Like
Mm-hmm.
big trauma being like how you touched on earlier, like sexual abuse or
Mm-hmm.
being mugged, or
Mm-hmm.
um like intense physical abuse,
Yeah.
versus a little T being like, um like one of the book in the book The Body Keeps Score, they talk about one of the little T's being the paper that you put your heart and soul into and got
Mm-hmm.
a bad grade on in fourth grade.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a little T. And maybe you're like, oh, whatever. But like, what story did that write in your body?
Yeah.
And little T's can be as little as small rejections, or
Mm-hmm.
being bullied or called a name in school. Like, and obviously there's a spectrum of that, but like those little moments that kind of slowly
Mm-hmm.
um write a story,
Yeah.
or kind of ingrain themselves into our nervous system or our
Yeah.
map of who we are. um and the difference between those, um you know still having
Mm-hmm.
still resulting in like some of these behaviors.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's a big T or a little T, you're still going to pick up a response to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're still going to cope with
Yeah.
whatever happened. And so that's where all of these responses really come in. And whether that's like in relationships, personally, there's like so many different avenues that these play a role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this will definitely destroy your relationship if you like don't do anything about it. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
I think that's like, I think sometimes there can be a like this perspective of, oh, I'm the only one that's affected.
Mm, mm, mm,
Oh,
mm.
I'm anxious all the time, but that's my problem. Like, no one else is affected. Like, that's not
No.
how that works.
I'm here to tell you as and I'm gonna just pull in a little codependency right here
Yeah.
talk. When your parents are dysregulated, I'm here if you're a parent and you're listening, if you're my parent and you're listening, I love you so
We love
much.
you.
And your dysregulated nervous system affected my childhood 100%. When you as a children learn to regulate themselves from their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you might think it's only affecting you, but
Yeah.
that's just not reality. I wish it were because,
Yeah.
then so many little babies would be spared.
It's fascinating when you start realizing how impactful the primary caregiver nervous system is at creating the blueprint
Mm,
for the child's nervous system in utero.
yes.
And so it's really beautiful. And also, like, if you are a mom listening and you're like, oh my God, I was so dysregulated when I, conceived this child, or like things were real tough for me. Like, I was definitely like burnt out in survival mode raising these
Yeah,
kids. That is okay. Like, there's 100% the ability for people to be resilient, to create a new blueprint, all of that.
absolutely.
But it's really fascinating to learn about how the primary caregiver's role, it's as simple as, it's the attunement of
Hmm.
baby to mom
Mom.
generally, or whoever that primary caregiver was, but generally mom. Of when you have a baby that's laying on your chest, the attunement of the biorhythms is what it's called, of like the breathing rate, your heart
Yeah.
rate, the tension or softening in your fascia, all of that stuff
Hmm.
is communicating to baby and allows them to form their nervous system of, oh, mom is really tense and our
Hmm.
heart rate is elevated and we breathe shallow around here, and all of those things. That messaging is received very clearly because body language is a baby's only language and first
Absolutely.
language. And so we're hyper attuned to those things, especially as an infant. And then you start to develop those patterns. And again, it's things that you can learn to repattern or reorient your nervous system into the context of your life that currently is. So
Yes.
maybe you're someone who had a really uh, tough upbringing, really dysregulated, and now you're in a different context in your life, a different environment in your life. You have new relationships, etc., and you have the opportunity to renegotiate that whole thing.
Absolutely. And that's, like we talked about in the last episode and we'll continue to talk about, it's like maybe that's part of your healing journey is
Yeah.
rewriting that blueprint, or maybe that's why you're inspired to go and learn some different tools to cope, or
Yeah.
maybe it's because I think motherhood and like being a parent brings out this stuff in a lot of us, and nothing is that mirror like having children. And for a lot of people, I think that can be a huge inspiration to like, wait a second, this is bleeding onto my kids and I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to repeat this pattern. Or maybe it's like a new relationship for me. That's been a huge thing is I am not gonna gonna go down this road in the same way that I have before, because
Yeah.
what's at stake, and like I really love this person, I really want to go on this journey with them, and so it's going to take both of us being committed
Yeah.
to this change, right? And to learning how to rewrite the blueprint and not just show up how we know how.
Yeah.
But I do think, like you said, it is so fascinating. And I just also want to like really put a little disclaimer and just state like, we're all doing the best we can with what we have.
Yeah.
And a lot of us generationally did not have these tools. These weren't even discussions being had for our parents.
Yeah.
And so just shining a light and bringing compassion and empathy to the fact that like, you know, if you grew up in the 60s and 70s, like
Hmm.
there's a good chance that it was like, what are you crying about? Get the fuck over it. Like,
Yeah.
pull up your bootstraps. Let's move forward. And also, like, not a lot of discussion around regulation, around awareness,
Yeah.
um, around these things. There was a big separation, many moons ago between like the parent and child, but also just like those divine qualities of motherhood, of connection, of the earth and just being connected to this whole thing. And so like that disconnection actually has like gone down generations and goes back generations. And so
Hmm.
just being really gentle with yourself and realizing that um it's not your fault and there is no need to beat yourself up, to carry guilt or shame around maybe how you have shown up, or maybe how you currently are showing up right now. Just holding compassion and a space for yourself to just be and accept, like, right, you
Yeah.
know, because it is, I think it's so hard. Sometimes we hear this stuff and we want to like, we want to be, we want to blame other people, we want to be angry, or we feel really shitty because it's like, fuck,
Yeah.
I did it, I repeated it.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I
Yeah.
mean, shoot, I have repeated it. I'm I have repeated it in places that I'm like, oh no. And I have a deep awareness around a lot of this.
Yeah.
And I repeat it still. I'm gonna repeat it again and I'm gonna
Yeah.
do my best to like work with it and heal it. But really understanding that it's like that thing we've talked about, the ripple effect of
Yeah.
doing nervous system regulation and learning kind of how to rewrite that blueprint so that we can help
Yeah.
heal, not just ourselves, but the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's greater than ourselves every time. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you're in a state of survival mode all the time, and that can be that high high levels of anxiety, or on the other end of that, the absolute depletion.
Yes.
People in your life are affected by that. Yeah, people are affected by that in ways that you might not even be aware of, and they might not even be aware of it. And so I think it's important to recognize like it's worth putting in the work to learn how to regulate and to find a space of greater balance or greater tolerance, to the stressors that we are exposed to. Like we're all exposed to stressors, we can't avoid it. So it's learning how to like work within the framework that is your life, so that you can show up better for yourself, for your relationships, for your kids, for your job, for your friends, like all the things. And I think it's a big disservice to just think like, no one's affected by this. Like I don't really need to do anything about this. Like it's literally not the reality. We are picking up on so much information from each other all the time.
Right. And that brings me to this thought about like a lot of people who experience trauma at a young age. You know, when we're little, we're supposed to really have like egocentric
Mm-hmm.
awareness and like really are, as kids, it is normal to think that like you are the center of the universe. I don't really know how else to word it, but
Mm-hmm.
like to have that perspective. But as we grow and as we learn as adults, we're supposed to go from the egocentric point of view to like the ecocentric and like realize that
Yeah.
there's an ecosystem, there's a whole community, a world. There are consequences for our actions. There is a ripple effect of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when we're traumatized at a young age, we actually never come out of egocentrism. And that's where, you know, emotional immaturity, and we'll talk about this more in the codependency talk, but like um when we are emotionally unable to like regulate ourselves, and when we are really stuck in that point of view, it does have a deep effect, especially on our kids, our loved ones, our
Yeah.
relationships, even our jobs. Like there's so many facets it affects. And so
Yeah.
um I think, like you said, you know, it's so important to just acknowledge that like it's never just for ourselves. It's like always for the
Yeah.
greater good. And that's so important, especially, you know, in the world today. There's like so much noise, there's so much
Yes.
going on. It feels kind of like wild times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also think there's like a lot of pain
Mm-hmm.
that shows up in the world today.
Yeah.
And when we can try to meet some of that pain with a little bit more regulation, a little bit more compassion, a little bit more acceptance and understanding, and not meet it with more reaction,
Mm-hmm.
more frustration, anger, more pain, you know, I feel like that's actually where a lot of progress is made, as opposed to kind of maybe what we see out in the world today.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely worth like putting in the work and the reflection and being able to just recognize like number one, we all were given, you know, a blueprint of some sort, and we you kind of touched on this earlier of we don't want to necessarily like we're all doing the best that we can.
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of us, your parents were, their parents were, you currently are, your children are, like everyone is doing the best they can with what they currently have.
Yep.
And we can judge that all we want and be like, but I think they could be doing better. No, you don't know that. Like we're all just doing our best. And so
Yeah.
it's really important to recognize that from a personal standpoint of like, I am doing the best with what I have in this moment. And I can continue to be curious and to learn and grow and improve for the sake of myself, for the sake of others. And I can also recognize that where my blueprint came from is what it is. Like I can acknowledge it, I can hold space for it, I can be sad about it, I can grieve it, I can
Yes.
be angry about it, maybe like whatever or grateful maybe. Like maybe you were gifted a beautiful nervous system blueprint and I love that for you.
Oh my gosh, I love
Like
that for you.
so that's amazing. But holding space for that and also stepping away from the desire to maybe blame and
Mm-hmm.
basically discharge any ownership onto another person, generally would be your primary caregiver. And
Yeah,
so that's a big thing I think that we'll probably talk about a lot, will be kind of like a thread through a lot of the episodes that we do, of taking that personal agency and ownership and saying, okay, so I can't go back and change any of it, but what I can do is take control today
absolutely.
over my current nervous system or my current environment. Maybe you're in an environment that's incredibly dysregulating, an abusive relationship, a job that's like incredibly overwhelming and just like
Mm-hmm.
not aligned with what you want to do. Whatever it is, like you have the agency as an adult now to be able to do something different. You get to choose different.
Absolutely. I love that you said that. And we'll definitely like everything you're saying right now is like sparking so many things that I'm excited to get into in the future, especially in like our codependency talks,
Mm-hmm.
because this is like this is one of the things you and I have talked about a lot, is kind of like
Yeah.
how our work weaves together so beautifully,
Yeah.
because it's so relative.
Yes.
And I think that, you know, there's probably something I've experienced in sharing my work is people are like, gosh, your parents must have been terrible. Or
Mm-hmm.
like people have said to my parents, like, oh my gosh, did your kids have a terrible upbringing? And it's like, no, I had a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful life, and it's so much more nuanced than that. And I am so
Yeah.
grateful for the life I've been given
Yeah.
and for the love I have. My parents are some of my best friends. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, I just moved
Mm-hmm.
out of their house and I'm almost 30. Like,
We
shut
love
up.
it.
Like, literally, no. Like, I love these people.
Yeah.
Maybe in an enmeshed way. We'll get into that. But also like understanding, like, I have all this knowledge. I've learned so much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and my mom actually brought me a lot of these tools. She's the one
Mm-hmm.
that, when things were so dysregulated and got to a point where it was like, oh no, like our
Mm-hmm.
household is in shambles every day.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, I don't have the tools to help these
Mm-hmm.
girls. So what did she do? She got us into therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was such a gift because now here we are today. And all of us, the three of us, are,
Mm-hmm.
my sisters and I have all in our own way, like gone and sought
Mm-hmm.
deeper understanding. And it kind of brings me this phrase to mind of like, what happened to you is not your fault,
Yeah.
but what you do with it is your responsibility
Yes.
and how
Yeah.
you heal it. And I think that ties into nervous system. It's the same, like in your work, you're dealing with a lot of people who have experienced intense trauma a lot of the time,
Yeah.
or maybe you're just like really dysregulated or
Mm-hmm.
highly anxious and unsure why.
Yeah.
And understanding that like none of this, there's no fault in any of it,
Yeah.
but there is responsibility and how to move forward and how to integrate it into your life.
Yeah.
Because if we're just not going to integrate it, right, that can be really paralyzing and really damaging.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, taking that ownership and just recognizing like we don't have to go back and blame or do any of that, but what we do get to do is choose to create a new path ahead,
Absolutely.
which is amazing to have that perspective and to feel empowered to do that. So
Yeah.
I love that perspective. One of the things I wanted to bring up is like a common misconception about
Yeah.
nervous system stuff, nervous system regulation, trauma experiences, things like that. Again, going back to social media, there's a lot on social media about trauma being stuck in your body, particularly the hips, and it
Mm,
comes up a lot. And again, it's something that's like so much more nuanced than what social media has the time and space for or the attention span for. And so I think it can be, again, this really like confusing concept of like, oh, trauma's stuck, it's like living in my body. What does this mean? Like it
get
gets like,
out.
yeah, like how do I do this, how do I get it out? And I literally see programs of like, release the trauma from your hips and here's what you have to do. And like people, it's like a big market for this, right? And so it creates, I think, a lot of confusion, and also like an expectation of, oh, if I, go through this program or do these exercises, like this
Mm,
is going to be it. Like I'm going to heal
it's a
my trauma.
solution. Yeah.
Yeah. And so just to clarify, like what that even means is when you have like how we started this episode of like some of the physical sensations, the physical responses of trauma. So like tension being a really common example of like when you are faced with some sort of a threat, your body is bracing. It's bracing for impact. It's
Right.
becoming tense. And so for a lot of people, that tension can continue to carry in your body. And that's essentially what this is talking about, of this pattern of being stuck. I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe pattern is maybe a better word for like it's patterned into your body as a structure, as a frame. And essentially, and I'm sure we'll do episodes on ways to kind of start releasing some of that stuff and to really invite a more like a softening into your mind and in your body and in the way that you engage with the world around you. But that's essentially what it is holding on to that tension. And so maybe that's full body tension, maybe that's in your hips, and that's where it is, right? But it's not literally living in your body.
It's not like a parasite.
It's not a parasite. It's not something that you can do a little detox cleanse.
And it'll be gone.
Yeah.
I love that.
So
No, thank you for clearing that up for everyone, because I mean I see that stuff, and I think
yeah.
even like the spark notes, because let's be real, a lot of the time we're not reading the full book, or like we don't have time, but we hear about the concept of it. And so
Yeah.
like when we hear like, oh, the body keeps score, things like that, like we kind of
Yeah.
maybe conceptualize it as like
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
it's being held here, but actually it's like so much more like granular than that.
Yeah.
And so that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I mean, listen, we're all getting advice sometimes from the social media that's maybe uh less than helpful, and also maybe not everyone is actually qualified to be
Yeah.
sharing some of this information, and that's like a huge thing I know we've both talked
Yeah.
about and we see. all of that. So,
God, some of it's so damaging. Like, I'm like, who is regulating this? Nobody, and that's great. But also, like, yikes.
yeah, yikes. No, I agree completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
We could have a whole episode about that, like the integrity of this
Mhm.
industry and the integrity of,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm sure we will. But
Yes. And friends, we understand. We're doing this episode for an hour. There's no way we can cover all the nuance of the nervous system in an hour. So, like,
no.
definitely, I mean, use this as like a stepping stone to, look into these concepts further and to like do more exploratory work and curiosity and all of that. But like,
Work with Kayla.
yeah, work with me. I mean,
Work with
I
Kayla.
take clients just like you.
Absolutely. And she
Yeah.
helps you and she's qualified. I'm actually, this brings me to a question I wanted to ask you.
Mhm.
Like, what really inspired you to get into like somatic experiencing and nervous
Yeah.
system regulation? Like, was there something specifically that
Yeah.
sparked this journey, or like, can you speak to that?
Yeah. I mean, there were a couple different things from a client standpoint when I was working in the addiction and mental health industry as a counselor at a rehab, working with clients who were so incredibly dysregulated
Mm,
and disconnected from their body. And again, like phone use, like we talked about, drugs and alcohol are a great way to completely escape. And when you remove the substance and then they're just stuck with like, holy shit, this is like really uncomfortable. I don't want to be in this experience.
yeah.
That is their life and their body and their
Mm,
mind. Having the tools to be able to say, okay, so how can we create some more tolerance within the nervous system to be able to sit with these really uncomfortable physical sensations, emotions that you just desperately want to avoid, memories maybe that
mm,
you want to escape from. So all of those things that I think for a lot of people, again, it's really easy to want to lean toward like a quick fix and quick fix a lot of time in rehab is like, how can we fix this with a medication? And there's no shame in using medication in any way. Like, it's a very useful tool for so many people to get through some really difficult situations. But what I found for so many people is they would utilize those tools and there was still this huge missing piece of like, okay, but how do we actually sit with the emotion? How do we actually
yeah.
tolerate it and experience it in its fullness, move through it, and know that you're going to make it out on the other side okay?
Right.
So that's the kind of like the client perspective of what I was seeing a lot. And then just for myself personally, the anxiety and just like burnout and depletion that I started to experience working in the industry was quite intense at some point. Like, I found myself coming home and from work after a really long day of like running on fumes and
Hmm.
anxiety and massive amounts of stress and coming home and wanting to completely check out.
Yeah.
Like, there were times where I would tell my husband, like, I literally feel like I need to just be in a dark room with like my eye mask that I sleep with and like noise canceling headphones. Like, I am so spent. I can't. And when that happens, like,
Oh,
obviously
yeah.
your relationships suffer, your everything suffers when
It's
you're in that state,
overstimulation. Yeah.
completely overstimulated internally and externally. And so it was over the course of a few years of really working to regulate my nervous system within the context that I was in when I was still working in that job of like, okay, so this is my reality right now. I am working this job. It's serving a purpose in so many ways in my life. How can I do this in a way where I'm not feeling like I'm dying?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
and so it was great for me to experience like, okay, I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to take ownership over my own nervous system response and apply the tools that I can, and to sit with the discomfort at times, or to, close my blinds in my office and just
Hmm.
take a minute to like lay on the floor and just breathe for a
Yeah.
minute. And over time, what I noticed is as I began to kind of calm my nervous system or regulate my nervous system, to tolerate things better, I started to have like increased capacity to envision something different for my life. And so it was
Yes.
like the like stepping stone to be able to actually do something different with my life And now we're here doing a podcast. So I don't know. I don't know, you guys.
I love it. No, absolutely. You know, like as you were talking about sort of that experience of just like being spent and like
Yeah.
what happens when we're in that space and we're not regulated and we don't have the tools is we end up bleeding on people who didn't cut us.
Yes.
And that, like you said, it's damaging to relationships. It's
Yeah.
so important to find those tools. So I'm so glad that like that this inspired you to do this work, obviously, like because we're here right now today because of it.
Yeah.
And I think there's something really powerful about working with someone on these things who's been on the journey. Like I think we've all had experiences where maybe like on a textbook level someone understands something, but to
Yeah.
walk the path
Mm-hmm.
has a different quality. And
Yes.
so that's, I think, such a powerful gift that you're able to give the people you do work with. And
Yeah.
you know, we've both like shared this and talked about how again this like weaves again so perfectly our work together because we both have this passion
Mm-hmm.
for actually getting people through lived experience, getting people the help
Yeah.
and the tools because oof, like you said, you know, being able to imagine something different when you're in the thick of it is so hard.
No, you can't. Like that's the whole point, right? Survival is like, how do I focus on
Right
the
here.
only thing that I need to focus on right now, which is the right here and right now.
No, literally, it's like the ability to see the forest through the trees
Yeah. Yeah.
versus there's a tree right here.
Yes.
And I totally relate so much to that. And I think over time as we like deepen our relationship with our listeners and
Mm-hmm.
as we're on this show and on this, I mean, is this a show? As we
Yeah,
have this
girl.
yeah, girl, it is a show. As we're
Watch
on
us
this,
on YouTube. Catch
I
us on
know, literally,
YouTube,
we are
guys.
on YouTube. In case you didn't know, but exactly, like as we go down this path, like really being able to um, share that and
Yeah.
help people, whoever's listening, that maybe right now you can't see the forest through the trees. Maybe right now you're in that place where you're so dysregulated or you're just like in survival mode.
Yeah.
Um, we're here for you. We see you. We feel you, and stay with us. Stay tuned. Be with us because we have tools. We are here to help, and we hope that you know we can provide some of that insight so that you guys can continue
Yeah.
to find to imagine something different for your life.
Yeah. And to know that it's possible. Like
Yes.
it's so very possible. Do we want to wrap up with just like a favorite way that we calm
Yes.
our mind and body down?
This is a great first step to helping you imagine something that's, you know, to helping you regulate. Absolutely. Do you want to please go first?
I feel like so there's it's I'll just choose one, I guess. But like I think something that I've found to be so helpful, probably maybe the most helpful, is literally creating like mindfulness around my physical state throughout the day.
Yeah.
So like checking in with how I'm holding my body, how I'm breathing, because all of those things, it's like the bidirectional or two directional relationship between your mind and your body and what the information is that it's receiving. So if I'm tense, I'm telling my nervous system things aren't safe. So I check in with my body throughout the day of how can I create some softening? How can I, create expansion, openness to signal to my brain like, hey, things are okay. You're
Yeah.
safe. Everything's fine. How can I deepen my breath? All of those things, like just little check ins. And I love that too, because it's not like I don't have to take time to do that.
Right.
I don't have to go do a 20-minute meditation, which by the way, I'm not going to do. I don't like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it's not for me. If you like it, amazing. Or if you like it as one of our listeners, I love it. But like for me, that's just not something that I have found to be super helpful. And so
Right.
the like little check-ins throughout the day are so helpful for me.
I love that. That's really beautiful. And it makes sense, right? Like
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So for me, I think one of my favorites, because like you said, like, how do we choose? There's so many different
Mm-hmm.
things and so many different seasons, like ask different things of us.
Yes.
But one that's been really helpful for me as a Avid fight responser. Okay.
Mm-hmm. We love that.
We love that for me. If you've,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, you've had the pleasure of seeing me flip my lid once or twice in our 30 years together.
Yes.
So for me, like one of the biggest tools that has really helped was getting back in my body when I started to feel, because something that I really experienced was I really hated the flight response. I wish.
Mhm.
I wish I could walk away. No, I'm kidding, you guys. Totally joking. But I I really did enjoy. I don't enjoy how the fight response feels in my body. So a
Yeah.
tool I learned was making connection, making contact with my body or with my environment in order to kind of interrupt the response.
Yeah.
And so like what that would look like is maybe I was in an uncomfortable conversation, or I started to feel myself going into a response. Um, whether that was like at a holiday or in a hard conversation with a parent or even in a relationship. And what I would start to do is just start describing things in my head, not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
out loud, because maybe I'm not in a position where I can be like, that chair is green.
Mm-hmm.
People would be like, what? I'm talking to you. Are
Mm-hmm.
you, that's rude. So I would start to touch things in my environment. So like right now
Mm-hmm.
I'm wearing a dress, and I would describe it in my head and say like, okay, this, it's rigid, it's bumpy, it's textured, it's cloth. The chair feels hard on my
Mm-hmm.
back. My toes are cold.
Mm-hmm.
I see a blue and white fence across the street, like just truly in my head. And I would do it. And, obviously maybe you're hearing this and you're like, well, that's like if someone's talking to you or if you're in a situation. Honestly, if it's preventing you from going into your trauma response,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay if you miss a few words of what someone's saying to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was like a really, really helpful
Yeah.
tool for me, was just like getting back in my body, even like rubbing my thighs or
Oh, yeah, I do that a lot.
yeah,
Yeah.
starting to like kind
Yeah.
of like wake up the nervous
Do
system.
this.
Yes, putting
Yeah.
my hand on my chest, tapping, like,
Mm-hmm.
you can tap your collarbones. If you're watching, you can see I'm doing this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just doing little things to really interrupt the brain from like going on the whole journey and distracting it, kind of
Mm-hmm.
bringing it into a physical sense.
Yeah.
That's been really helpful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Creating that presence and literally grounding and orienting back to the space around you
Yeah,
instead of, going into fight or flight or whatever it is, it's just bringing you back to the ground.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
amazing. Well, I have to do a little shameless plug.
I
For
love it.
my if you
Absolutely.
guys are interested, like if you're listening and you're like, oh my gosh, this is me, like this is super this is resonating on a really deep level, we'll put it in the show notes below, but you can check out some of the resources on my website to either work with me one-on-one or to utilize some of the I kind of rotate through some free offers and then some low ticket paid offers as well. So
Love it.
yeah. Well,
Thank you guys so
yes.
much.
Thank you. And we will see you next week.
Yes. Have a great weekend. Or if you're listening to this after the weekend, just have a blessed day.
Yes. Okay.